Welcome to week 3 of a 6-week pantry challenge. I'm HR and this is Homebody Rundown. My goal with the challenge is to primarily use items that we already have in the house and do minimal grocery shopping. That will primarily be dairy and produce for us. We eat a mostly pescatarian diet, but a couple of the kids do eat meat, so you may see a little of that in these videos. We live in Michigan and it's typically pretty cold outside right now, so it's a good time of year to take inventory. Just see what we have in the pantry and start using up those items that may be getting near their expiration date. Some of the things I come up with are kind of weird and don't work out, and I'll never make them again, but I will show both the good and the not so good here. This is not a recipe channel. I don't usually follow recipes, but I hope there's some inspiration or maybe ideas in here for you. I made a lot of food last week, so we did a lot of leftovers over the weekend. This is Sunday, and I'm going to make apple bread. Now, typically I make apple bread with applesauce, but we ran out. So I am using one apple that had some damage on it, and the last Asian pear or Korean pear. It's still good, and it does taste a lot like an apple, so I figured it would work. Getting the dry ingredients into this mixing bowl. This is a 6-quart KitchenAid mixer. I put extra cinnamon in the apple bread. I had about a half cup of whole wheat flour left upstairs, so I used that, and the rest is all-purpose flour. Getting in the egg and the oil. Spraying the pans with avocado oil spray. I get these large bottles of spray from Costco. Put the peeled and chopped apples, or apple and pear, into the food processor. And really chopped it up pretty well. There's quite a bit of moisture in there. And I didn't measure. I'm not sure how much this is, maybe 1.5 cups. Using a spatula just to check the sides and bottom of the pan to make sure everything is mixed well, and dividing it up between 2 baking pans. You could use a measuring cup to make sure this is more evenly distributed between the 2 loaf pans. I just eyeball it. So sometimes you do end up with one loaf that's larger. They seemed to bake well. They had a really nice color. Normally, apple bread, zucchini bread, banana bread. I use pretty much the same recipe for all of those. Normally it comes out of the pan just fine. The second one came out okay, but I did let it cool another 10 minutes after the first one did not work out. There's a lot more moisture in this bread, which I don't know why, because normally, like I said, I use applesauce, but maybe there was more apple and pear there than I realized, and the pear was fairly juicy. But it looks fantastic, except for the one where the bottom was messed up. But we already ate like part of that loaf anyway. This was so good. I like this better than just using applesauce or applesauce and an apple. That pear was delicious in here. I do keep this bread in the refrigerator because it has pieces of fruit in it. Making some easy food tonight. This is brown rice in the Instant Pot. I was going to make white rice, but I ran out. I do have some in long-term food storage, so I think I will be getting into that over Pantry Challenge. But this is probably better for us anyway. Also, youngest child requested fish sticks. So just making a few of those in the toaster oven. Very easy, and made some frozen corn. And I made 2.5 cups of brown rice, I think, so part of this will go in the freezer. We were down near Sam's and Costco and Whole Foods, so I picked up quite a bit of stuff for a pantry challenge video, but it is all produce and dairy except for orange juice and eggs. No, wait, also applesauce. But this should last us for a while, and I won't have to do much shopping next week. The total for all 3 stores was $96.52. Making pasta salad on Monday. This is a lot like leftover soup, where I just take what I have in the refrigerator and throw it in. For pasta salad, I pretty much do the same thing. It's just whenever I have leftover pasta. I'm making up a dressing with white wine vinegar, olive oil, red pepper flakes, roasted garlic powder, salt, black pepper, onion powder, garlic powder. This is kind of just very basic. I did not add Italian seasoning. Sometimes I do that. On this day I didn't. I have to taste everything, like I've said before, because I don't measure. So I have to just keep tasting. I decided to add a little more roasted garlic powder. And I did add some sugar to this. It only takes a little bit to sweeten it up. That's it. That's all I added. Going to dice up part of the, well, I think I had a leaf or something from the pepper stuck on my finger. So I had to get that off. But dicing up part of this green pepper for the pasta salad, and the rest of it I will slice and put in the refrigerator to eat with hummus. And I bought red onions and not white onions because I was thinking I need to force myself to use more of the minced onion that I have, so I did not buy white onions. But that's fine. Red onions are really nice to have for salads. So I did dice up the pasta into smaller pieces because it was penne. Added in the pepper and diced onion, some diced roasted red peppers. I had originally got out some green olives, but those looked gross. This is feta cheese that comes in a block and is stored in brine. So I just cut off what I wanted. These are marinated artichoke hearts, and my husband has not really been liking those lately, so I'll just add those to my bowl. This turned out great. It was delicious, and it takes a little time. It probably took 10 minutes to get everything assembled. This is a little different. Usually I make refried beans right after I cook them. I get them mixed up, add the seasonings at that point. But I found 2 bowls of beans in the freezer. One is black beans that had some liquid with them still, and another was pinto beans with no liquid. I'm going to combine these just in a very basic way to make some quick quesadillas. This is onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and I also add some lime juice to these. Mashing them up. If they need water or more liquid, I'll add water if needed. But I think it's fine. I had 1 white flour tortilla left and got some whole wheat tortillas out of the freezer. So I'm going to be able to make a total of 4 tortillas worth of quesadillas. This is some of that brown rice, and then youngest child just loves mozzarella on her quesadillas. I cook these in a cast iron pan over about medium heat. Sometimes I turn it down a little less than medium after the pan gets really hot. This was very quick and easy, and it got a couple more things out of the freezer. Dinner tonight is going to be salmon cakes with risotto, and for the risotto I need vegetable broth. This is Frontier brand vegetarian broth, and I ordered it from Azure Standard. I'll link Azure Standard in the description below. It says to mix this powder in with hot water, so that's what I'm doing here in a canning jar. Stirred this up really well, and after it sat out on the counter for a while, it really settles. So I want to make sure to give this a shake before I use it. For the salmon cakes, I'm using canned pink salmon. I bought this years ago at Walmart, and I'm not sure if my local store still carries it or not. I have not seen it. I did sort through the salmon and pull out any of the larger bones. That's just a personal preference. My family does not like those. Adding in about a teaspoon of garlic powder, a mix of black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, and about a teaspoon of salt. This is kosher salt, so it's a much larger granule. And then about a tablespoon of lemon juice. Adding in an egg, and we'll get this all mixed together and just see what the consistency is like. Adding in some mayonnaise. This is not a lot of mayonnaise, maybe 1.5 tablespoons. The mixture was not very wet, so I added in only a small amount, maybe a couple tablespoons of breadcrumbs, and it's holding together really well. To go on the side, I'm making a dip. This is going to be a dill dip, so it is, I had fat-free Greek yogurt, a smaller amount of mayo, chopped roasted red peppers, the dried dill, kosher salt, and lemon juice. Also a small amount of the black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder mix. I will put this in the refrigerator until we're ready to eat. To fry up the salmon patties or salmon cakes, I'm using 2 cast iron skillets, adding in olive oil and avocado oil, and this was way more than I needed. I am used to making more when my older 2 boys are at home. Usually these pans are filled completely, and I was just on autopilot. So these will be extra good. They're going to have a lot of oil on them. I use a scooper so that all of these salmon cakes are about the same size and thickness when I make them up. I just use my hands to get the right shape and thickness. And I do wear gloves because it can take a lot of hand washing to get your hands not smelly. So plenty of room in these pans. For the risotto, I am using the Instant Pot. I put some butter in here with the rest of the red onion that I chopped up yesterday. And it's on the saute function to let the butter melt and let the onions cook for a little while. Just like a few minutes. Then I added in the broth and the rice, and we'll let that cook. The one in the center always gets done first, so that one was ready. And then the ones around the edges, I like to rotate them so the outer edge sits on the inside for a few minutes to get more even color on the cake. But these were holding together very well. And here's what the ones in the other pan looked like. They were a little more crispy. At this point, I just want to mention that if you fry these in your house, your whole house is going to smell like fried fish. And I do not like that, but it is 0 degrees with a negative wind chill outside, so I was not willing to cook outside. The risotto time is up. So just stirring that, and now I'm going to add in frozen peas, about a cup, 1 more tablespoon of butter, and I can already tell this will need some more broth, so I do end up adding a little more broth. I tasted it, added in black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder mix, and then a small amount of Parmesan. This is less than the recipe calls for, but I just emptied out what I had in the refrigerator. I only have 1 more Parmesan in the pantry, so I'm kind of wanting to be careful to not use it all up. This was great. It was creamy, and I really like making risotto in the Instant Pot because it's so convenient. The salmon cakes were fantastic. These may be the best salmon cakes I've ever made. But they're probably cooked in the most oil I've ever used as well. So there's that. Tonight I am getting out black beans to soak overnight. So I sort through them, rinse them, and then put in clean water. I soak mine in a brine, and I got the instructions for that from an America's Test Kitchen cookbook. I can link America's Test Kitchen below. And I put this lid on it, but I am not attaching the lid. It is not sealed. I just set it on there to keep ladybugs out because we do have plants in our house and we still have some ladybugs flying around, even in the dead of winter. So it's the next morning. I rinsed the beans and got them in the Instant Pot with clean water. Please make sure to follow all the instructions for your pressure cooker. These things can explode, so be careful. I cooked them for a few extra minutes because they are getting pretty old, and I can tell here they did not need that extra time. They are very well done. So I will pull some out into a couple dishes in order to freeze. I think I'm going to freeze the square one. And then the round one, I may end up freezing it because next week I want to make homemade black bean burgers. But today I am making a vegetarian lentil soup. I'll link the inspiration recipe from Peas and Crayons in the description below, but I am not following that recipe exactly. These are some green chilies with frozen corn, diced bell pepper, minced onions, tomato paste. This is some green salsa. Spices included cumin and chili powder, tomato sauce. I just salt and pepper to taste. This is more of the vegetarian broth that I mixed up. And then I rinsed and added in red lentils. And I'm going to let that simmer, well, brought it to a boil, and I'm going to let that cook on low for a while until the lentils are done. To go along with the soup, I am making cornbread. I did not think I could. I thought I was out of cornmeal, but I found some in a jar in the back of the pantry. Another good reason to do a pantry challenge if you're not super organized. Getting the flour, cornmeal, and the other dry ingredients in the KitchenAid mixer, and I use the whisk attachment for this. I bake the cornbread in a cast iron skillet, and I put this into the oven while it was preheating to melt about a tablespoon of butter, and I brush that around the sides and the bottom so it doesn't stick. Other ingredients are melted butter, milk, and egg. While that starts whisking together, I like to take that moment to double check the ingredients, and lo and behold, I forgot to add 2 eggs. I had only done 1, so I caught that at this point. Got that in the mixer bowl, and now I will let this all blend together. And I forgot to mention there is sugar. There's a half cup of sugar in this cornbread. Putting the batter into this buttered cast iron now, and it bakes at 400 degrees, a pretty high temperature. In my old oven it took about 20 minutes, but it seems like my new oven runs hot, so I typically check it at 18 minutes. Getting back to the soup and checking that out, the lentils are done. These little red lentils do not take very long to cook. So now I'm going to add in the black beans. I normally would have added these in earlier, but they had just overcooked already in the Instant Pot, so I didn't want them to turn to complete mush. I'm also putting some of the bean cooking liquid into the soup as well. I figure that has a lot of flavor. Tasted it, it was good, so that is done. And the cornbread is out of the oven now. Looks pretty good. It gets a little browner on top with my new oven, but it's not burned. Added some shredded cheese. This is a Colby Jack, I think, and some Greek yogurt to mine. You could also crumble over tortilla chips. That would be really good as well. And you think I would have learned my lesson with that apple bread, but I was impatient and I did not let this cool as long as normal. So it didn't quite come out perfectly. but it doesn't matter. The cornmeal I have, I think it's a fairly coarse grind, so you do end up seeing more of that cornmeal in the finished product. But I don't think it affects the taste, at least we don't mind it, and this tasted fantastic. I had a can of rhubarb in the pantry and a gluten-free cake mix that I wanted to use up, so I'm going to make a rhubarb cake with a boxed cake mix. Now, because it's gluten-free, it does say to use a full stick of butter for the fat. I'm going to just do half a stick of butter and replace half of it with canola oil. And the butter was, I'd put it out several hours ago, but the house is kind of cold. It's very cold outside, negative wind chills, so I don't think it got very warm. I switched from the whisk to this beater and it's still not really incorporating well, so putting in some of the cake mix and the eggs, and it's smoothing out quite a bit. Got the rest of the cake mix in there and it wasn't looking right, and I realized I totally forgot there was milk in this recipe. So trying to get that in there, and it took a minute, but it all got incorporated and looks great, really smooth. Pouring it into a glass 9x13, and I'm used to a rhubarb upside down cake my mother-in-law used to always make, but I'm going to try putting the rhubarb on top and see how that goes. I've never bought this before, and it said it was in slices, and they're kind of large, so I'm going to put them into this mini food processor. I just want the liquid, the syrup that it's in, and those pieces to be better blended. And I'm using a slotted spoon for this. I was a little worried to put all of this liquid onto the cake, so I think there were maybe a couple tablespoons of liquid left. This was a terrible idea. This cake looks awful. It looks like brains or something. I am so so horrified by how it looks, but the cake did bake well. I ended up putting foil over it for part of the time because it was taking a while. But it tasted good, just not appealing looking. So I will definitely go for the rhubarb upside down cake next time. I mix up our own spreadable butter. So I have 4 sticks or 1 pound of butter sitting out on the counter. It's been out for a few hours to get more to room temperature. I put it in the food processor. It is salted butter. I add a little more salt, not much, and then avocado oil and olive oil. So this butter ends up being more savory than neutral or sweet. But my family, everyone likes it and eats it, and we all really like having spreadable butter in the refrigerator. This is the last meal for this video. It is going to be some kind of red beans and rice. I don't have any Cajun seasoning. Mine had gotten kind of old, so I threw it out. So I thought I would try Old Bay seasoning instead with some smoked paprika and chipotle powder. I am not using fresh onion. I'm going to try some of this minced dried onion and onion powder. For the sauce, I'll use some tomato paste and tomato sauce. Into this pan, this is an enameled cast iron pan, adding olive oil and one of those green peppers that I picked up this week. Put the seasonings in and we'll let that toast or cook for just maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Into a cast iron pan, I'm putting some olive oil and cooked brown rice. I'll add a little garlic salt to this. It already has salt on it, but just adding a little more. And I remembered that I had this roasted garlic in the refrigerator. I had wanted to put it in the risotto earlier this week and forgot, so adding that in with the tomato paste and then the tomato sauce. Added in part of it. I wasn't sure how much I wanted in here. Put in the minced onion and realized I needed a lot more sauce because I want to let this simmer on the stove for about 30 minutes or so. Added in the rinsed kidney beans and a little of the vegetable broth that I had mixed up earlier this week, just so it'd have enough liquid while it sat here on the stove. And I tasted it. I added just a touch of sugar, not much. So this has been simmering, and it was good. It wasn't great, but it was good and easy and a good way to get some beans and veggies. Highlights from the week had to be that apple pear bread, the salmon cakes, and honestly that really ugly rhubarb cake. For a gluten-free cake mix, it was really good. The rhubarb was very tangy. It was honestly delicious. I just need to figure out a way to make it prettier. I'm thinking for next week maybe some shrimp tacos with homemade tortillas and a vegetarian chicken pot pie. As always, thank you so much for watching.